Good evening, folks, and welcome back to my channel. Tonight's video features 3 short stories from r/nosleep. If you enjoy the stories, be sure to check out the authors. And if you enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like and a comment. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And with that, enjoy the stories. He offered me an ice cream every day for 7 years. I finally took it. It started when I was 18 years old. I'm 25 now. On my 18th birthday, while I was out taking a walk with my parents, I saw the man on the street for the first time. My parents had stopped to exchange gossip with an elderly couple, and as I looked on ahead, I saw him. He looked like someone that slept on park benches, and probably hadn't had anything going his way for most of his life. He was holding out an ice cream cone, offering it to me. I grew up in the height of the stranger danger ad campaigns, and naturally they had become a part of my mental procedure in dealing with situations such as these. I firmly shook my head no, and the hand with the ice cream withdrew. If that had been the end of it, then I wouldn't be writing this story. I would have just dismissed it as a strange and unusual encounter, the likes of which happen to random people all the time. But the next day, he was back. Again, holding an ice cream and looking as shabby as ever. And the next, and the next, and the next. Each day, I softly mumbled and complained about him to my parents, but make no mistake, every time I looked out into the street, he would be there, staring back at me, holding out an ice cream, almost like a peace offering. Day after day, every day, this daily routine went on for close to a decade. He was there wherever we went. We took a vacation to Japan. He showed up outside our hotel. We took a trip to Aunt Ava's cabin. He was standing among the trees in the forest. Wherever we went, he followed us, always with an ice cream to offer. It took me 3 years to realize that nobody else could see him. I opened my door that morning to see a fresh batch of snow with some very fresh footprints. As far as I could tell, the footprints came all the way up to our front door and then turned around and walked away. I tried pointing that out to my friend, but she just looked at the snow, back at me, back at the snow, and told me there was nothing there. I was just seeing things. I pointed to the man himself standing behind our mailbox, but again, nothing. Just standing there, holding a fresh ice cream cone. So the others can't see him. I can. Over the next few years, I tried every method possible to get rid of him. I spoke to shamans. I spoke to witch doctors. I spoke to spiritualists, babas, yogis, even philosophers. Nothing. I'm 25 years old now. I decided the only way to get rid of him from my life was to give him what he'd been offering for 7 years. Take the ice cream. So I did. I walked directly up to him and took the ice cream from him. Mistake. Big mistake. I shouldn't have done that. Instantly, I felt my arm grow colder and colder until it felt like it was going to shatter into pieces. I felt the world around me start to fade and started experiencing intense visions. I felt my consciousness contracting, if that makes any sense, and I felt myself fading from the world. It took me a second to realize I was becoming like him. I was disappearing from the world. I slapped him in the face with my other hand, an action that seemed so impossible I think it actually startled him. My other arm felt warmer for just a second, just long enough for me to drop the ice cream and run. That was last month. Ever since then, I've started seeing the man again. But worse, I've started seeing all his friends. Everywhere I go, wherever I look, there's a pale, dull-eyed ghost looking at me, offering me ice cream. 3:13 a.m. I sat there in the bed, slowly wrapping my hands in the duvet. What did I expect in doing this? That it was all going to be magically okay? That I would wake up and everything would be like it was? I don't know. I guess it was just therapeutic. To be honest, everything did feel more like a dream. The events that happened before being so impossible that there was no way that it could be real. But that was the nightmare of it, knowing that everything, no matter how unbelievable or terrifying, actually occurred. That scared me the most. I glanced over to the clock on my bedside table, 3:14 a.m., time to go to sleep. It must have started about 3 months ago. It began with a nightmare. I wish I could describe it to you, but I can't. I guess the closest thing to it would be terror, unbridled and free, running riot in my mind. I woke up, cold sweat dripping down my entire body, panting like I had just run a marathon. It was still dark out, so once I calmed my heart and my breathing slowed, I got back to sleep, being careful so as to not disturb my wife. But it happened the next day, and the next, and the next, always at the same time, 3:13 a.m. The nightmares got worse. I'd wake up utterly drenched in sweat, screaming out to someone, something, anything, waking my wife. She'd console me, her happy eyes burrowing defenses into my soul and protecting me from any unholy demons who tried to lay siege on me. Every time, the clock would be at 3:13 a.m. I could barely sleep at this point. 2 o'clock nights became the regular, and my wife, bless her soul, tried to stay up with me. But since she's more of an early bird rather than a night owl, she'd tap out at about midnight, and I'd fall asleep, only to also wake up a short while later, screaming bloody murder. I tried sleeping in a different bed, on the sofa, even in a chair, but the nightmares persisted. One time, the nightmares got so bad I thrashed around trying to beat things away, and even though my wife was certain that there was nothing near me and that I hit the headboard, I was certain that I had punched flesh. To end this debate between me and her, I bought a camera that would record overnight so we could watch it back. Sleep, nightmare, calm down, slept more. We checked the camera and ran it back a few minutes before that unholy time, and we saw it, or maybe even them. 2 enormous black hands emerged from behind the headboard, veins encircling every part of their fingertips and knuckles, gnarled and wrinkly, with long fingernails that extended the hand even further out. They crept slowly up to my face, tingling, ready to dissect their new meal. But before they could grab me, I woke up, screaming and roaring, and they retreated, slinking back behind the bed. It was alarming to see. I had really hoped that it was some condition, but there was a real thing out to get me. We checked behind the bed the moment we saw the footage, but there was no monster there. This was when I stayed up for the first time. I hadn't ever gone the distance, mainly because I didn't really feel like the time would actually be a defining factor, that I'd probably just wake up instantly, but now I knew for certain that it would not be ready for me when I was awake. My wife dozed off at around 1 a.m. I don't know how she did it, knowing that there were 2 monsters behind the bed, but she slept. 2 hours and 12 minutes later, the time was now. Would it show up? It did. I watched with a contented smirk as it tried to feel around for my head. A sense of confusion fell upon it, as if it couldn't find its target. Then it got my wife, grabbing her head with one hand and her mouth with the other, It hoisted her up and started to pull her behind the bed. Her eyes shot open, but no sound was heard, as it was covered in the all-encompassing palm. I wasn't going to let her go without a fight, so I grabbed her legs, holding on for dear life, desperately hoping, praying that it would give up and it would slink back to its cave. It was winning the battle. Slowly, the top of her head became swallowed by the darkness, then the rest of her. But still, I held on. Her neck and shoulders were next, but still I held on. The rest of her torso followed, and even though my grip was slipping on her, I held on. Even if I died holding on to her, I'd ensure that my rigor mortis would keep her here. Never let her go. Never let her. Never. I came to. The sun started to peer in through the curtains, and the birds chirping outside. And she was gone, swallowed up by the beast. I sprinted around every room in the house, grasping onto every last strand, every wild theory that she was still alive. A sick prank? A hallucination? Maybe this was one of the nightmares I was having in the night. But as much as I hated to accept it, I lost her. My beautiful wife. Now I stay up every night, waiting until that time, knowing that if I fall asleep, it would get me too. As sure as the clock ticks, I may have lost her, but I will not lose to it. He keeps banging his head on my door. I don't really know what to make of what happened a few days ago. During a late-night gaming session, I decided to take a break and walk over to my local convenience store to grab some snacks. As I stepped outside of my apartment complex, I turned and saw something that entirely made me regret my decision. It was dark, so I couldn't really see all that well initially, but I could make out the shape of a man repeatedly bashing his head against someone's door. At first, I didn't know whether to wave him down in case he needed help, or if I should call the cops. So I kind of just stood there and hoped that this person would see that there was a witness to whatever it was he was doing. I guess it only took him a few moments to notice me, because I could see his silhouette stop, turn, and then walk out into the lit sidewalk. I don't think I'll ever be over what I saw. The man stood naked on the street, bleeding from his grotesquely overgrown forehead. He seemed to have no arms, but his feet very closely resembled large, hairy hands. He had strands of thin, oily black hair that fell over puffy eyes, and his mouth hung agape, showing only a handful of crooked teeth. We locked eyes for a moment, and as if he could sense my weakness, he jerked forward towards me. I sprinted back inside and closed the deadbolt behind me. Just as I went to the closet to grab my bat, I heard a loud bang on my front door. I cursed and ran into my room where I called the police. I was forced to listen to that god-awful banging for at least 7 minutes before the cops showed up. The relentless assault on my door left me whimpering, wondering what the hell I should do if he made his way inside. When they arrived, I went outside to explain the situation. The man was nowhere in sight. The police informed me that they had gotten similar complaints all week, but hadn't seen anyone matching the description I'd given them. They took note of the apparent blood on my door, and while they seemed interested in my story, I still got the generic, "we'll keep an eye out," and they were on their way with that. It only took about 5 minutes of the police being gone before he started banging on my door again. When I went back into my room to get some sleep, I got a text from my next-door neighbor telling me to stop making that noise, otherwise he'd be talking to the landlord. I tried to explain the situation to him, but he just told me to handle it, or he would come down and handle it for me. I struggled over my next decision. Did I really want to confront whoever or whatever was outside? Deep down, I knew I didn't. I had my bat, but I suppose the best way to describe my feeling was it didn't feel like I was confronting a person. It felt like I'd be facing an animal. There's a level of unpredictability a wooden bat doesn't protect you from. I mean, this guy has been trying to tear down a sturdy door with his skull, and he was winning. It's not like hitting him with a bat was really going to do much, right? But with the same confidence of a child trying to shoo a spider out of his room, I resolved to at least attempt to scare him away. But before I could even open my bedroom door, I heard a loud crash coming from my kitchen, and at that moment my heart sank. I didn't know how he got in, but I could see the man stumbling about in my kitchen, knocking over everything in his path, letting out something that was a cross between a wail and a grunt. Like a cockroach, he scurried back to the front door and began furiously banging his head against it again. I slapped my hand to my mouth to keep quiet and quickly decided to hide in my bedroom closet. Bang, 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 repeatedly. He just wouldn't fucking stop. I didn't know how long he would go or if he'd come looking for me, but it all suddenly came to a halt when my phone started to ring. Peeking out of my closet, I could see I stupidly left it on my bed. I wanted to grab it, but the loud footsteps coming near my door kept me rooted to my spot. I could partially see the door from where I was. He slowly creaked it open with his grotesque feet and poked his abomination of a face inside. I could hear his labored breathing as he sniffed the air and stared directly at my ringing phone. My heart beat fast in my chest as I prayed that he wouldn't decide to come rummaging through the closet. But as soon as my phone stopped ringing, he took one final look around my room and left. I waited a few more seconds, and I could hear the front door close behind him. I stayed in the closet for a few minutes just to be sure he wasn't going to come back. As soon as I felt comfortable, I sprinted out of the closet, grabbed my phone, and ignoring the litany of calls from my neighbor, I phoned the police. I expected to give a statement on a break-in, which I later found out happened through a busted window, but I quickly found out that something much more grave occurred when they arrived. Apparently, while on their way over, someone else had called about finding a body. Once the police had isolated me from the scene, they informed me that it was my neighbor's body. The details were gruesome. His face had been completely bashed in, and he had multiple bite marks on his body. It also appeared as though his neck had been broken, twisted nearly 180 degrees. As far as I know, I'm not a suspect, but they did fear that the person or thing I saw might have been involved. They did a sweep of my apartment, noted the blood, and took some samples of the strewn glass. I don't know how much it means, but they suggested I find someone to stay with, at least for a little while. I'm not really sure what to even make of all of this. I've never heard of anything similar to whatever the fuck that thing was, and I'm wondering if maybe someone knows more than what they're saying. I'm not an expert on police procedure, but there seemed to be a level of calm throughout all of this. I guess it's why I'm not a cop, but I'd be freaking the fuck out. Some deformed person is brutally killing people? I hadn't seen anything on the news about it. Shouldn't that be all over the place? Going anywhere at night stresses me the fuck out, and I'm looking into how quickly I can get a gun. I just want all of this to be over. I swear the past couple nights, I can still hear the bang, 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 bang in the back of my mind. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that story. If you did, be sure to leave a like and a comment, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like me to narrate one of your stories, be sure to submit them to r/horrorxnerds on Reddit. You can also send me a direct message on Reddit at username NerdxCorexCreep or on Twitter at NerdxCorexCreep. I'd also like to give a huge shout out to my very first patron, As the Raven Dreams. He's a fellow creator and makes very excellent content, so be sure to check out his channel as well. And if you'd like to support the channel as well, be sure to visit patreon.com/NerdxCorexCreep. With that, I'll see you in the next video. Have a creepy night.